Welcome back to Dream Birds Aviary. In today's video I'm going to talk about a very common problem in aviaries. Birds throwing food everywhere. Many people think this is normal, but in reality there are reasons behind it, and it can lead to waste, mess and even health issues. In this video I'll show you why birds do this and how you can reduce food waste in your aviary. Now the first reason birds throw food everywhere is actually very simple, and that is natural behavior. In the wild, birds do not eat from a clean bowl like we give them in an aviary. They spend most of their time searching for food, moving around, picking through different things and choosing what they want to eat. So when you give them a full tray of seeds, they naturally start digging through it. They are not trying to waste food, they are simply looking for their favorite seeds. And while they are doing that, they push everything else out of the tray. This is something you will notice a lot with birds like budgies, lovebirds and cockatiels because they like to pick and choose. They don't just eat everything in front of them, they search through the food first. Also, when birds crack seeds, they leave behind empty shells. These shells build up and make it look like a lot of food is being wasted, but in reality, some of it is just leftover husks. So the important thing to understand here is that not all food throwing is a problem. Some of it is completely natural behavior and part of how birds eat. But if your birds are throwing too much food, or most of the food is ending up outside the tray, then that is when we need to look at other reasons and start fixing the problem. Now the second reason birds throw food everywhere is because of the wrong feeding setup. Sometimes the problem is not the birds, it's how we are feeding them. If your food trays are too open, too wide, or overfilled, birds can easily push food out while they're eating. When birds stand inside the tray or on the edge, they start digging through the food just like we talked about before, but because the setup is not controlled, a lot of the food ends up outside instead of being eaten. Another common issue is overfilling the bowl. When the bowl is too full, birds don't need to search properly, they just throw food around to find what they like, which creates more waste and more mess in your aviary. Also, the position of the feeder matters. If the feeder is placed in a busy area or at a height where birds feel unstable, they will move around more and knock food out. So it's very important to look at your setup and ask yourself if the tray is too open, if there is too much food, and if it is placed in the right position, because sometimes a small change in your feeding setup can make a big difference in reducing food waste. Now another very common reason birds throw food everywhere is because they are picky eaters. Birds do not eat everything in the bowl, they search for their favorite seeds and ignore the rest. So what happens is they start digging through the food, picking what they like and throwing everything else out of the tray. This is especially common with budgies, lovebirds and cockatiels because they like certain seeds more than others. If your seed mix has different types, they will always choose their favorite first and push the rest away. Over time, this creates a lot of mess and wasted food even though the bird is actually eating properly. So the problem is not that they are hungry or misbehaving, it's just that they are being selective with their food. The best way to manage this is to give a balanced mix and control portions so they don't just eat one thing and waste the rest. Now another important reason birds throw food everywhere is when there are too many birds feeding from one place at the same time. When multiple birds try to eat from a single tray, they start pushing each other, moving around quickly and competing for space. This creates a lot of movement, and as a result, food gets knocked out of the tray and wasted. You will often see birds jumping in and out of the feeder, flapping their wings or trying to move other birds away, and during all of this, seeds go everywhere. This is very common in aviaries where birds are kept in groups, especially budgies and lovebirds. The problem here is not the food itself, it is the feeding setup and space. If birds don't have enough room to eat calmly, they will create mess without realizing. The best way to reduce this is to provide multiple feeding points so birds can spread out and eat comfortably without competition. Now another very important reason birds throw food everywhere, and something many people don't realize, is boredom. Birds are very intelligent animals, and when they don't have enough stimulation in their environment, they start to create their own activities. One of the easiest things for them to play with is their food. Instead of eating properly, they begin picking up seeds, dropping them, throwing them out of the tray and repeating this again and again. This behavior is not always about hunger or feeding, it's often about keeping themselves busy. You might notice this more in birds that are kept in smaller spaces or in aviaries where there are not enough toys, perches or natural activities. Birds like African greys, Amazons, cockatiels and even budgies can all do this when they get bored. Sometimes they will sit near the feeder and just keep flicking food out without even eating much of it, and this can create a lot of waste very quickly. Another sign of this is when birds seem active around the food but the actual amount they eat is very little. In these cases, the problem is not the feeding system, it is the lack of enrichment. To reduce this, it's important to give your birds things to do, such as natural branches, toys, different perches and even changing their environment slightly from time to time. When birds are mentally engaged and active, they focus more on eating properly and less on playing with their food. So if you see a lot of food being thrown out without being eaten, always ask yourself if your birds are getting enough stimulation, because boredom can be one of the biggest hidden reasons behind food waste in an aviary. Now another important reason birds throw food everywhere is because of the type of food being given and how it is presented. If the seed mix is too mixed, too dusty or contains too many unwanted items, birds will spend more time sorting through it instead of eating properly. They will pick up seeds, drop them, throw them aside and search for the ones they actually like, and this creates a lot of waste very quickly. Sometimes cheaper seed mixes or poorly stored food can also have broken seeds, empty husks or dust, and birds naturally reject these by throwing them out. You may also notice this when new food is introduced, as birds take time to adjust and may throw unfamiliar items away before accepting them. Another common issue is giving too many different things in one tray, which confuses the bird and makes them more selective, leading to more mess. The key here is to provide a clean, good quality, well-balanced seed mix and avoid overcomplicating the feeding tray. When birds are given proper food in the right way, they spend less time searching and throwing, and more time actually eating. So always pay attention to the quality and consistency of the food you are providing, because sometimes the problem is not the bird, it's what we are giving them. Now another reason birds throw food everywhere, and something that is very important to understand, is the timing of feeding and how often food is given throughout the day. Many people keep topping up the food again and again without checking if the birds have actually finished what is already there, and this creates a situation where birds become careless with food. When food is always available in large amounts, birds don't feel the need to eat properly, so they start playing with it, sorting through it and throwing it around more than usual. You might notice that even when there is already enough food in the tray, new food is added on top, and this mixes fresh food with old food, making it harder for birds to eat comfortably. As a result, they dig deeper, move things around and push food out of the tray. Another thing is when feeding is done at random times, birds don't develop a routine, so they don't settle into calm feeding behavior. Instead, they rush, search and scatter food more. What I always recommend is to have a simple feeding routine. Give food at set times, and avoid constantly refilling trays unless it is needed. Also, check what is left before adding more, because sometimes there is already enough food but it just looks messy due to husks and waste. When birds understand their feeding pattern and don't feel overwhelmed with excess food, they eat more calmly and waste much less. So timing and routine play a very big role in how your birds behave during feeding, and fixing this can reduce a lot of unnecessary mess in your aviary. Now that we understand the reasons why birds throw food everywhere, let's start looking at how we can actually reduce this problem in a simple and practical way. And the first thing I always recommend is improving the feeding setup itself. Instead of using wide open trays where birds can easily stand inside and throw food out, try to use deeper feeders or feeders with slightly higher edges so the food stays contained while the birds are eating. This small change alone can make a big difference because it limits how much food can be pushed out while they are searching. Another very useful method is to avoid overfilling the feeder, because when there is too much food, birds naturally start digging and throwing more, so giving smaller controlled portions helps them focus on eating instead of playing. You can also try spreading food across multiple feeders instead of keeping everything in one place, especially if you have many birds in one aviary, because this reduces competition and movement, which means less food gets knocked out. Another important thing is the height and position of the feeder. Try to place it somewhere stable where birds feel comfortable standing and eating calmly, because if they feel unbalanced, they tend to move more and cause more mess. Also, take a moment to observe your birds while they're eating, because every aviary is different, and sometimes small adjustments based on their behavior can improve things a lot. For example, you might notice one feeder is always messy while another stays clean, and this tells you where the problem is. So by making simple changes like better feeder design, correct portion size, proper placement and observing your birds carefully, you can start reducing food waste step by step without making things complicated. Now another very effective way to reduce birds throwing food everywhere is by creating a simple and consistent daily feeding routine, because routine plays a big role in how birds behave. When birds are fed at random times or food is always available in large amounts, they don't develop proper feeding habits, and this leads to more waste. What I always try to do is give food at set times during the day so the birds understand when it's feeding time, and this makes them more focused and calm when they eat. Instead of constantly topping up the feeder, I check what is already there, remove empty husks and waste, and then give a fresh portion if needed. This helps the birds see the food clearly and reduces the need for them to dig and throw everything around. Another important thing is rotating different types of food throughout the week, because when birds are used to a variety of food, they become less picky and waste less. For example, one day you can give soft food, another day soaked seeds, another day vegetables, and this keeps them engaged and balanced. You should also try to observe your birds during feeding time, because their behavior tells you a lot. If they're calm and eating properly, your routine is working, but if they're jumping, throwing and wasting food, then something needs adjusting. Over time, once your birds get used to a proper routine, you will notice a big improvement. They will eat more calmly, waste less food and your aviary will stay much cleaner. So consistency is key, and a simple daily routine can make a huge difference in controlling food waste. So now as we come towards the end of the video, let's quickly go over everything again so you can clearly understand why your birds may be throwing food everywhere and what you can do to reduce it. First of all, remember that some food throwing is completely natural. Birds like budgies, lovebirds and cockatiels will always search through their food and pick what they like, so a small amount of mess is normal and nothing to worry about. But when it becomes excessive, that's when you need to look at the real reasons behind it, such as the feeding setup, overfilling the tray, birds being picky, too many birds feeding in one place, boredom, poor hygiene, low quality food and also not having a proper feeding routine. All of these small things add up and create more waste than necessary. The good thing is that this problem can be improved step by step without making big changes. By using better feeders, controlling portions, keeping food clean and fresh, giving birds enough space, and creating a simple daily routine, you can reduce a lot of this mess in your aviary. Also, always take time to observe your birds, because every aviary is different, and your birds will show you what is working and what is not. Sometimes even a small adjustment can make a big difference. The goal is not to stop food throwing completely, because that is part of natural behavior, but to manage it in a way that keeps your aviary cleaner, reduces waste and keeps your birds healthy and comfortable. If you stay consistent and patient, you will see improvement over time, and feeding your birds will become much easier and more controlled. A question I get asked a lot is whether birds throwing food means they don't like the food or something is wrong with them, and the answer is not always. In most cases, it's just natural behavior or a small issue with the feeding setup, but it's important to observe how much food is actually being eaten compared to what is being wasted. Another question is whether you should stop birds from throwing food completely, and the answer is no, because some level of food movement is natural and healthy. The goal is not to stop it completely, but to control it so there is less waste and less mess. Many people also ask if changing food will fix the problem, and sometimes it can help, but usually the issue is not just the food, it's how the food is given. So always focus on setup, routine and observation rather than making too many sudden changes. From my own experience, the biggest improvement comes from small, consistent changes rather than big adjustments. When I first started, I also had a lot of food waste in my aviary, but over time, by adjusting feeders, controlling portions and watching how my birds behave, I was able to reduce it a lot. Every aviary is different, so the key is to learn from your own birds and make changes step by step. If you stay patient and consistent, you will see improvement, and feeding your birds will become much easier and more controlled. Before I finish the video, I also want to quickly show you the soft food that I normally give in my aviary, because this can also help improve feeding behavior and reduce waste. Usually, I give soft food every couple of days, and this includes a mix of boiled egg with bread, soaked seeds and soaked or boiled corn. I mix everything together so the birds get a balanced and soft diet that is easy to eat. This type of food is especially good before the breeding season starts, because it provides extra nutrition and helps birds stay in good condition. When birds are getting proper soft food along with their regular seed mix, they are less likely to become overly picky or throw food around, because they are more satisfied with their diet. So adding soft food into your routine, even just a few times a week, can make a big difference in both their health and their feeding behavior. So that's it for today's video. I hope this helps you understand why your birds throw food everywhere and how you can reduce waste in your aviary. As you've seen, a lot of this behavior is natural, but with the right setup, good routine and a few simple changes, you can make a big improvement. The key is to observe your birds, stay consistent and make small adjustments over time. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe and share it with other bird lovers. Thank you for watching Dream Birds Aviary, and I'll see you in the next video. For now, enjoy the natural sounds of the aviary.